These temples were not just built for the royal couple, they were actually dedicated to them. Deep in the southern part of his empire, Amenhotep and T were worshipped as gods.
The shadow of Pharaoh extends in stone along the Nile to the African provinces of his empire. He is there in a physical presence, looking out over the empire that he controls.
Amenhotep's message to his Nubian subjects was clear. At the base of the columns at Celeb are images of captive Nubians, a graphic representation of Pharaoh's power for all to see. Here in Nubia, it was especially important that Amenhotep was in control. Nubia's mines supplied most of Egypt's gold, and gold was what allowed Amenhotep to control his rivals.
The requests from the foreign kings is for gold, gold, and more gold, because, as says one of these kings, in your land gold is as plentiful as dust. It's the Fort Knox of the ancient world.
Amenhotep had secured the gold supply. But more and more of this gold was pouring into the temple of Amun-Re. Amenhotep's priests in Thebes now controlled a third of Egypt's wealth. They also interpreted Amun-Re's will, which Pharaoh had to obey.
At this stage, the priests of Amun-Re were probably more powerful than they had ever been in the history of Egypt. The high priest of Amun at Karnak would probably in fact have a power superior to that of the king.
To shift the power away from Amun-Re's priests, Amenhotep began to show interest in another minor god, the Aten, the visible sun. It could hardly have seemed important, yet it was about to change everything. In 1352 BC, Amenhotep III, the great king, the diplomatic genius, died. Egypt was plunged into mourning.
The death of the king must have been a terrible event. This is a man who had dominated politics, religion, the life of not only his subjects, but the life of the empire for such a long time.
Even in the Near East, Amenhotep was mourned by his rivals. Foreign kings wrote to his widow, Queen T, expressing their personal grief.
I cried, I sat, I did not eat or drink. I mourned, saying, if only I were dead, or 10,000 were dead in my land, and that my brother whom I love and who loves me were alive as long as heaven and earth.
Amenhotep III died in the course of his 39th year. Probably in his last days he could look out over the empire that seemingly the sun would never set over. He could think of a world at peace, where diplomacy ruled, where the wealth of Egypt was undoubted, and he could leave it all to his son, Amenhotep IV.
Amenhotep IV had grown up in the most powerful family on earth. Now he found himself pharaoh and ruler of Egypt's empire. In the first years of Amenhotep IV's reign, it must have seemed like nothing had changed. But at his court, the new pharaoh was encouraging ideas that would soon transform Egyptian society. A radically new style of art was flourishing. According to the artists, it was the pharaoh himself who had taught them. These artists rejected the conventions of traditional Egyptian art. Instead, they celebrated the vibrancy of the real world. Their work was sensual and filled with movement. But what shocked Egypt most were the new depictions of the royal family.